everyone to Brilliant Business Insights. This show solves your greatest business leadership and professional development challenges. We realize there isn't one solution to every problem, so we bring you proven strategies, best practices, and expert insights to get you, your business, your employees where you want to go. So thank you for joining us today. We have a fabulous topic, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot of interesting, fun things to take away and make your business that much better.
To take away the suck, because today's topic is help my coworker sucks the life out of me, emotional energy at work.
Oh, how often does that? I've heard
Never.
that.
No, it never
Right.
happens.
Or my boss, or my kids, or I mean, you name it. It's like you talk to someone, and you're like, oh my God, that was exhausting. So that's what we're talking about today.
And today, Lori and I are here.
Yes. And this is Jen, my co-host. Jen, thank you for being here with me. Jen is a Thrive and Resilience coach. We are both with Thrive, a human development company. She guides clients to step out of suffering and stuckness, be challenge ready, and truly live their beautiful lives while grounding powerfully in the present moment. Jen's background includes 16 years in experiential marketing, consumer experiences, and marketing operations in agency and corporate settings. That's impressive.
Thank you.
Her passion is guiding patients with life-threatening chronic illness and their caregivers to fully live the life they're working to heal. Jen believes each day has the potential to be remarkable simply because we wake up to experience life again. I like that because I heard, it's interesting because I heard a podcast one time, I don't remember who it was, and they said, you can, your alarm can go off, you can hit your alarm clock, you can fall out of bed, or you can jump up, the example they used, you can jump out naked, running through your house, shouting at the top of the top of your lungs. And I'm like, I don't know that I jump out naked every morning. But you can put on nice comfy slippers or whatever it is. So I like that you bring that in. Every day in your life can just be this exciting, moment.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate that. And this is Lori. She's the co-founder and CEO of Thrive, a human development company. She works with small to global-sized companies, coaching executives and training leaders, teams, and influencers using leading-edge skills, strategies, and concepts to make the most impact in their businesses. For over 30 years, she's thrived in the financial, business, and consulting industries, primarily working with Fortune 500 companies, and 14 years ago, Lori incorporated coaching into her practice, providing skills that are key in elevating human impact. She's passionate about helping people find a healthier, more exciting way of doing business in life, because just like you were saying about me and wanting to have people enjoy life, like why can't we be excited about work, and why can't we be excited about life as we go through each day?
Yeah, excited about our morning and just, why go through life not being excited about it?
Right. And it's normal to not do that
every day. Oh, yeah.
And also later in the show, we will have Melanie Amini-Hajibashi, who's a licensed professional counselor and wellness coach. She'll be joining us later in the show.
Oh, I'm super excited about that. Melanie has gone through our coaches training circuit, so very happy to have her on and sharing some of her insights. She's now in professional counseling and is running her own practice. So
she's amazing.
Yeah. So we'll start with emotional energy at work. And so part of the premise behind this is you might have a frantic boss or a down in the dumps coworker or a stressful work environment or conflicting values or toxic customers or whatever it is. So the premise behind help my coworker sucks the life out of me and all your emotional energy at work is we all experience these things. We experience, a boss coming into our office and he's had a bad day and he dumps it on us and all of a sudden we feel crappy or we take on his stress and he'll come in and be like, this has to be done now. And so his bad day shifts and becomes part of our bad day, or vice versa. If we're having a bad day, we get up in the morning and hit the alarm clock and fall out of bed and dump coffee on the way to the office. And now we're irritated, and now someone comes in our office and we're chirping at them because our morning didn't go well.
Right. Well, but so how is emotional energy created?
And so, emotional energy, there are a lot of things going on. Usually it's stimulated from a thought. And so what happens is we have a thought about something like, the alarm goes off. No, I hate the sound of that alarm. And so that sends, right, that sends, our pituitary sends out a chemical cocktail. And so I call it a cocktail because it's a blend of whatever you have going on in your system. And so that triggers a response within our system. And so I often say that you can feel hijacked by your emotions, like you can't control them, especially anger. People are like, oh, I just couldn't control it.
Right.
I had a trigger and I was overwhelmed and I got mad and I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people outsource it and make it seem like it's not part of their control. And it is, they have a choice in it, but it doesn't feel like it because that chemical release of hormones went through our system, and that's what's triggering everything through every cell in our body. And so it's interesting because one of the examples I like to use is I had a friend who had PTSD, and we were walking through the park and a bird flew out of the bush and he hit the ground. I mean, every cell in his body dropped him. He didn't even have time to process it consciously.
Right.
And so that's how emotions are. They become so ingrained in our responses toward others, become so ingrained that we no longer consciously process it. It becomes part of our autonomic nervous system and we're just reacting. So that same employee comes in that I have a challenge with every day, and what do? I react. I fly off the handle. Oh, you know, I have this story, this neural pathway that this guy drives me nuts. Why can't he do anything on his own? I'm always hand-holding. Like, you know, the guy can't even pick his favorite cheese out, you know, and he's in my office crying about it. And so that's my story and my belief and how I'm responding to this individual has patterned itself in my chemical release and in my neural pathways. And so I always respond to this person that way. I get that same feeling every time because that's the cocktail that's being released in my system.
Right. And what I find very interesting about this is once you have that neural pathway created and, you know, the person walks in and you have that thought and that trigger and the chemical cocktail is starting to release throughout your body, like you can't interrupt that distribution of the chemical cocktail.
Yeah.
It needs to dissipate and run through your body. And so the best way to not have that negative chemical cocktail, I mean, you know, it's all natural to us, but to have that start to ruin your day or have it suck your energy is to what?
Start reprogramming your thoughts about the individual.
Right.
So when that individual walks in my room, instead of, not him again, it's like, how can I start thinking about this individual differently? Maybe he's, and I probably shouldn't say this, maybe he's nice looking, so whenever he walks in, ooh, he's nice looking.
Well, that would change your thought.
Yeah, you shouldn't act on that, especially in business, or you could get in a lot of trouble. But just something funny to take you out of state, because what happens is I've created a state around this individual. So anytime he comes in, I have this emotional state, and I want to back up and talk about how those emotional states are created and what they are. But so I need to start thinking different thoughts about this individual so I can start reprogramming the neural pathway, reprogramming the thoughts so that the chemical release starts becoming different. So it doesn't happen like that. It's a process. Some things can come in where you can have shifts that are that fast, but we're not going to go into that today. But I need to start thinking differently about them so that the whole chemistry in my system every time I see that individual starts changing. So I can actually reprogram my system so that when he comes in, I actually have a genuine, loving, and heartfelt experience with the individual.
That's amazing.
Yes. And so getting back to what I was mentioning earlier about the field, and so how you show up, how I respond to that other individual showing up, it's all part of like your energetic field. So science calls it different things. You can call it the biofield, the electromagnetic field, the auric field. Depending on what line of science you're in, they call it something different. But science has proven that there's this field around us, and it works through electromagnetism. And so that's why, you know, we feel differently when a full moon comes out, because the electromagnetic field of the planet's different. And so that's why people, you know, tend to get a little more intense around those times. So if you want the proof behind it, trust me, the science is out there, go look it up. But so that energetic field is what we're projecting to others. And so if I have a story about this individual, I'm carrying that everywhere. The individual knows it, I know it, they feel it, whether they can identify it or not.
Totally, yes.
Yeah. They just feel it in your presence. Or with my boss, you know, if my boss comes in yelling, it's his field projecting out to me. That's the emotion I'm picking up. And that emotion we pick up, and we can take on in many different ways, that's entanglement, that's emotional contagion, it's social contagion, it's osmotic exchange. Here again, depending on what branch of science you're in, they call it something different.
Right.
And so
So, I mean, that's a wonderful explanation of what emotional energy is. And I really appreciate that because it helps me understand what was happening in my corporate days, where I would be like, quote unquote, happy go lucky, kicking my heels as I'm walking down the hallway. And then there's this one person every time would walk by me and just everything would drop.
Yeah.
Like I just collapse into myself. And so that helps me understand what that means is I was walking into or picking up his electromagnetic field, his auric field, whatever you want to call that, and then actually taking on his emotional energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's exactly what happens.
So, I mean, what do we do with it?
Well, so there are a lot of ways we normally handle it, which is we get angry with the person or defensive.
Or take separate hallways so you'll never see them.
Avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melanie will talk about that
Yeah.
later. We do this, we have this avoidance strategy.
Right.
And that's how we tend to handle it. And I know I'm guilty of that myself.
Me too.
There were certain Christmas parties we would go to, and there was an individual that after I talked to her, I would just feel exhausted. I was like, oh man. So anytime I saw her, I always tried to make sure I was on the opposite side of the room whenever she was there, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to engage, because then it's exhausting, and it's always, this negative, and it's just a heavy.
So it goes from like fa la 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 to
fa la la. Yeah. Yeah. What is it that Santa gives you when you're naughty?
coal.
Coal. Goes to coal in my stocking. But so that's not how we want to handle it.
Yeah.
It's the approach is we want to start checking in with ourselves first and foremost, and why am I feeling this way? Why does that individual make me feel this way? What can I do to start moving past some of those things?
So I hear you saying that a lot of times we absorb it.
Yeah.
We can take it on as our own. We can take it from the person and then carry it with us throughout the rest of our day, which is not needed. And then sometimes I bet then once we have it, we could throw it up on others.
Yeah. Oh, well, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Your spouse has a bad day, or your boss has, it was the example I used earlier. You dump all the coffee on yourself on the way to work, and then the first person who comes in your office, you're like, whoa. And they're like, what happened to you?
Whoa.
Right. And so those are some of the things we don't want to do.
Yeah.
So part of this show is to get you to look at that, so we're not projecting it onto, because I don't want to make your day bad, Jen.
If I have day bad, Lord.
We
don't want to throw it up all over John, our producer.
Right.
No.
Yeah, if we're driving here and traffic's bad, we don't want to come in and just be like, John, what happened to me? And now all of a sudden our production goes south because we're projecting and throwing up all over him because of something we experienced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so what do you suggest?
Well, so some of the suggestions, there are a lot of ways to deal with this, and later Melanie will bring in some of those specifics. But the first piece of it is just to really identify it, to identify what's going on, and to allow yourself to feel it. Because one of the things we don't want to do is we want to internalize it. So if I get into my office and I just had a bad day and I'm sitting at my desk, I want to be like, okay, just, my pants are stained. I hate my alarm. I got to get a new alarm clock because I broke it this morning. And just sit with it and be like, okay, I'm feeling these emotions, and it's okay for me to be feeling these emotions. And now what do I want to do with it? I'm just having a bad day and I want to sit in it and wallow? Or I want to have a better day, so I'm going to think of some strategies to move past it.
And it's our choice.
Yeah.
You can sit in it. You can sit in it all you want. But does that help you enjoy life? Does that help you enjoy work?
Right.
No. Okay, great.
And there are those days. I mean, I've had those days where I'm like, my day sucks, and it has continued to suck, and I'm going to sit here and let it suck because that's just where I want to be right now.
Right.
And that's okay. What happens to us is we get in those positions and we feel like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should feel better. I should, I shouldn't be feeling so bad, or why am I so angry? And so we start getting hard on ourselves, and one of the things we always say is you should all over yourself.
Yeah, don't should on yourself.
Right. And so how do I not should on myself is I allow myself to be there and think, what's one easy step I can take to move forward? Or, what's one thing I can do to take myself out of state? Like I mentioned before, you're now in a state. Right. This state has a momentum all into itself. I spent the whole morning creating this state. It's nice and robust. This is all in my energy field. And so I don't want to carry that anymore. That's heavy. It's stressful. I'm being mean and rude. What do I want to do with it now? So how can I move this forward? How can I get myself out of state? And what the crap?
What the crap?
So you get into this place and you just feel bad and you're like, what the crap?
Okay, I got one for you. So this is our what the crap segment. Okay, so back in my agency days, I was working really late. I mean, all of the lights were off except for in the main hallways. I was stewing in my cubicle. I was typing away. I think I was writing a manual for a NASCAR program or something. And I'm sitting there and all of a sudden, a golf ball flew over my head. Just like, I'm like, what the crap was that? And at first I was alarmed because I thought I was the only person in the building. But then it made me pause. And we're going to be talking about this later in the show as well. Like, it made me pause. I allowed myself to get curious instead of completely scared out of my mind. And I actually found others working late. And so I went and I found out who it was and we talked a little bit and it really re-energized me. It took me out of state, right?
Yeah.
I was more creative after the late night flying golf ball incident. However, I did ask them to yell the next time. Just to give me a little heads up.
Heads up so I don't get clocked with the ball.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was my what the crap. But it actually really helped move me forward that evening when I was in this place of complete suck.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated the golf ball.
And so that's great. So a good takeaway for people when they're in that state and they want to get out of the state is, what the crap? What the crap? Like, why am I in this state? How do I move out of it?
Thank you. We're excited to welcome Melanie Amini-Hajibashi to today's show.
Welcome, Melanie. Melanie is a licensed professional counselor and wellness coach who specializes in trauma therapy and emotional dysregulation. She helps individuals, families, and communities find healing from their past by reconnecting with their body in the present. I love that about
powerful work.
Yep. She believes everyone deserves a life worth living. Welcome, Melanie. We're so excited you're here.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you know that we're talking about emotional energy in the workplace, and we do have some questions for you if you'd like to share your insights.
Absolutely.
So, great. What are some tips to handling a negative situation with another person?
So I love this question, and I thought about taking it in two different ways for us today. So the first way is kind of in the moment, what to do when you are having a tough conversation or experience with someone who's just really struggling with some negative space. And then we'll talk about what to do if you have a little bit of time to kind of prep for that. So the first thing I like to start with is in the moment. What can you do to kind of honor your own space, and what can you do to maybe de-escalate a little bit? So a couple things that I always like to share is remembering what you have control over in every situation, and that's yourself. So one of the things I always share is to keep yourself calm, keep that voice nice and calm. If someone is really escalated, if they are just in a really negative space, if we can keep ourselves at kind of that calm level, what research shows is that people will actually meet us where we are at. So making sure to kind of keep yourself calm as best as you can. I also think it's really important in the moment to validate someone's perspective. When we learn to validate, it can help someone feel seen and heard, which ultimately, in most challenging or negative situations with another person, is what that person needs. Validation says what you are saying, what you are going through makes sense based on the context of your life. It doesn't mean that we, as the receiver, agree. We don't have to agree with what they're saying, but we can say what you're saying makes sense given what you've been going through. And sometimes just that simple act of validating can help someone feel seen and heard and can help bring them back down to a calmer space. I also like to say in the moment, what's really, really important is to honor your own capacity. Some days we are in our flow, we are in a much better headspace to be able to handle challenging situations with someone else. Sometimes we just aren't there. It's okay to pause and tell someone that you need to think about what they're talking about and to come back to it. So, remembering that you don't have to take a doormat approach. If you need some space or you don't have the capacity or you reached your capacity, to really honor that. Those were some things that I thought really in the moment would be really, really helpful.
And those
Um,
all
yep.
resonate with me.
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I also wanted to say, and I really love this question because I really just wanted to kind of pinpoint something in there and say it's really normal if our initial response is wanting to avoid conflict. I think avoidance is so normal. Avoidance will always show up at the table. But what we know about avoidance is temporarily, it might feel like, whew, a sense of relief. I can avoid that person. But ultimately, it will spiral and actually make things worse. So I just want to kind of point that out and just really validate if that's your first kind of initial reaction to working with difficult people, honor that, validate your own experience, and then come back to the table for some alternative strategies. I do have a few more, and then I will pass it back. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Perfect.
And I
Wonderful.
love that you bring up avoidance because I think in our Western society, we're masters of that. Like, especially if you don't know how to handle a situation or it feels overwhelming, our immediate response is, get me, our fight or flight kicks in because we have that really nourished. We're always nourishing that aspect within us. And so it becomes, how do I get out of here? Like, get me out of here. And so I think that's critical to what we're talking about today because we don't slow down and look at what am I feeling? How do I want to process this? If I keep avoiding it, it's going to come up and it's going to be scarier and uglier later. So what can I do to deal with it now so that it doesn't rear its head and throw up all over everybody, later in the day or next week or next month or whenever, it needs to express itself because it's one of the things we talk about and teach is energy needs an expression. It needs to be released. It needs to come out. And you can either do that effectively and in an honoring capacity and in a healthy capacity, or you can do that in a detrimental and have an aftermath because you didn't express it right or you didn't honor it in that moment.
Absolutely, Lori. And I'm so glad that you really shared that it's such a normal response because it is part of our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And it's something that just will trigger naturally. And I love that about slowing down to kind of honor what's going on there because you're right. In our Western culture and society, we are masters at avoidance. So we really want to kind of work on reshifting that so that it doesn't, like you mentioned, kind of create long term problems down the road.
You mentioned that you had some other insights into that question.
Absolutely. So, those were some tips kind of in the moment on what you can do that might be helpful. If you have a little bit of time, let's say that you have a difficult conversation coming up, or you have a coworker or someone in leadership that you just feel something needs to happen, but you don't know what. I have some strategies that can kind of help when you have just a little bit of time. So, something I like to work with clients on is recognizing and acknowledging your personal vulnerabilities. So, when we have poor sleep, when we have conflict in our family unit, when we haven't been eating correctly or eating enough, when we haven't been getting a lot of movement in our bodies, we have higher vulnerabilities that are going to make stepping up to challenging situations a lot harder. So, something I like to say is when you know something challenging is on its way, especially in the workplace, always coming back to your vehicle, to your body, on what your body might need so that you can show up as someone who's put back into their cup. We can't give from that empty cup, as I'm sure we know. So carrying vulnerabilities, I think, is just such a great first step. If you don't know how to handle the situation, coming back to the vehicle, to your body, can be one of the most powerful first steps.
I love that. It reminds me of when we do talk about one of our frameworks, the human internal operating system, that if your physical body isn't in its best capacity to come up against some of the other challenges, it's much more difficult to manage the other thoughts, emotions, beliefs, desires, behaviors. And so thank you so much for bringing that up, how important taking care of our physical body is.
Well, if you think about it from the standpoint of being hangry, because this is
Oh
one
my
for
God.
me. Yeah. I have kids that get very hangry, and it's like, okay, get food now because I don't want to deal with this. And so even those little things, like you mentioned, sleep, we were just talking about that earlier with John, our producer, how sleep is important. And it's those basics that people miss all the time. Because what's interesting is when you get busy at work, the first things that go are the things your body really needs to maintain the intensity. So you need good nutrition, you need good sleep. Those are critical for the intense moment you're in. But when we're overwhelmed and super busy, those are the things we let go of first. We let go of our yoga practice or working out or whatever it is that helps keep us energized. And so I always find it fascinating that in our Western society, those very things that are going to get us through those tough times are the first things we let go.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful perspective. And absolutely, it's the first things that go that we start to neglect our own selves. When in reality, if we can take the time and the space to care for ourselves, we're going to handle those tough situations a lot better. So, absolutely, Lori. Um, I have one last thing for this that I'm really excited to share, and
Yes.
it has to do with, again, if you have a little bit of time before you have to kind of come back into the arena, I like to describe it, into the battlefield, is a cope ahead plan. So, something that can be really helpful is for us to use our minds in visualization to already kind of think about what might be the challenge that's on our way. What might somebody say? What kind of skills can you use in that moment if this happens or if that happens? A cope ahead plan is something I work a lot with individuals who really struggle with emotion regulation, because if we're caught off guard, which again is such a natural response, oftentimes it's like our mind will just go blank on what to do. And then we oftentimes revert back to some of our kind of more primal skills and like irritability, anger, yelling. So if we have a cope ahead plan that we've already kind of sat down and thought about, okay, like if this individual says this, like I'm going to make sure I'm focusing on my breathing. I'm going to make sure to share if I don't know an answer, I don't know an answer. If it gets really heated, I'm going to say I need to take a break, and this is where I'm going to go to take that break. Helping individuals have a plan for conflict can be really helpful if we have that little bit of space, just because then our mind, if it does go blank, we already have a plan. So we can just revert back to it. So I love cope ahead plans if we can when it comes to conflict or negative space with another person.
Awesome. I love that you shared that because we teach what's called the power of intention. And it's a similar concept. So you plan ahead what your intention is, and that becomes your anchor point. So if things spiral off or go down a rabbit hole or fly off the rails, you come back to your intention. What is my intention? Is this? What do I want to gain from this? Or, what do I want to, how do I want to experience this? And so, like you said, that cope ahead strategy, when your mind, those derailers come in and all of a sudden your mind just is like, what? Too much stimulation. You can be like, okay, well, refocus. What was my intention? And that helps ground you and bring you back to the premise behind the interaction.
And I also love the way you frame it with the if then, because that's something that most of us have been introduced to for many years of our lives in schooling. We have that concept of if this happens, then this is the result. And so that kind of leads us into the next question, which would be, if I'm having heavy negative emotions, then the strategies I'll use are. So the question is, what are some strategies for dealing with heavy negative emotions?
I love that. Love, love, love that question. And I'll first start off by saying each human being is individual. And what will work for me might not work for you. It might not work for Lori. So it's really about exploring and trying on new things and figure out what works best for you. So, some things that I always like to say, though, that are kind of, I would say, like anchor or foundational skills that I think can be applied to any person in any situation is number one, making space for those heavy emotions. We live in a world where it's very fast paced. And a lot of times we have this mindset of, I'll deal with that later. I can't deal with this right now. I have to pick up my kids. I have to, make dinner. I have to attend to this meeting. I'll deal with that later. Oftentimes, what emotions need, kind of the first step, is to make space for them, acknowledge them. I like that idea of we talked about, name it to tame it. Like if we can provide some space for our emotions, then we can kind of allow them to pass through us instead of kind of putting them in our bag saying we'll deal with them later. Because emotions, what I really think is really universal is that emotions are messengers and they come to share a message with us. And if we can make space and time for them, we can hear what they are asking for, or we can hear what they're alerting us to. So we've got to make some time and space for those heavy emotions. That would be the first thing that I would share. Um, so after that, again, I really want to hone this down is with those heavy emotions, come back to your vehicle, come back to your body. If we can use our body as the vehicle for healing, for acknowledging those heavy emotions, sometimes those heavy emotions, Lori and Jen, are really coming from a place of we need rest. That might be sleep, that might be just slowing down, that we really need that rest. We might be desperately needing some type of nutrition and not even knowing it. And those heavy emotions they start coming up. They're trying to signal that something isn't working. So, how can we then think to ourselves, is this a rest? Is this a nutrition? Is this a movement? So, come back to your vehicle and think to yourself, okay, I might not know how to solve this problem, this emotion. I might not even know what to do with it. And that's okay. But we can acknowledge it and then we can take care of those vulnerabilities again because that's what we have control over. That's what's in our power to kind of gain some clarity.
That feels really, really good. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Melanie. I've often said our emotions are like a GPS. If we would use it as a GPS, as it's telling us there's something, we're off course or whatever it is, that's our most valuable indicator of where we're at and how we're proceeding. And it's telling us exactly what we need to be doing. If I'm overwhelmed, that emotion is telling me you're taking on too much, or you need to slow down, or you need to get stuff off your plate. And we never stop to look at it for the validity these strong emotions really have for us. I mean, they're our blueprint. They're showing up in front of us. That's a biggest indicator going, hey, look, something's going on here.
Yeah. Exactly. And I love that because it's saying that when we take the time to slow down and acknowledge our emotions, that powerful question as you were talking, Lori, was asking yourself, what do I need? What are you here to show me? What do I need right now? And oftentimes, if we can create space, the answers come to what we need in that moment.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And viewers, I just want to let you know that Melanie is a woman who walks the talk. She takes care of her vehicle. She takes care of her beliefs and thoughts. She takes care of giving herself space and pause to process all of those things. So
and she nurtures others
so much. So, Melanie, if people would like to get in contact with you, then where can they reach you for more tips?
Absolutely. So the best place is going to be on Instagram right now. So Melanie Amini-Hajibashi. And it can also be reached directly on my website at melanieamini-hajibashi.com. And I would love to be able to talk more or provide anything that might be helpful on your journey.
Thank you so much. And Melanie, we will include those links when we share this with everyone. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much. It was beautiful to see you again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. So I really want to thank Melanie for joining us today. And the one thing I really took away from her segment with us is permission to feel and pause. being able to pause, and then the if-then statement, the cope ahead plan that she shared is very powerful.
Yeah. And I like the validation aspect of it. And I know at Thrive, we use acknowledgement, but it's the same concept. It's just really what I found with people is they want to feel like they're heard. They want to feel like they matter. I mean, at the core of all of us, we want to feel like we're contributing to something bigger. We want to feel like we matter, like our opinions are valid. And so, like she said, just that validation of, what you're experiencing is real to you. Like I said about the chemicals, that's going on in their system.
Right.
And it's real, and they're feeling it as though it's real. And so any form of invalidation is essentially saying, what you feel, what's going on in your system, it's bunk.
Yeah. And you don't.
It's meaningless. Right. And so by really listening to people and acknowledging them and validating, you're validating what's going on in their physiology and their chemistry as well as what they're processing mentally. So when you're invalidated, you're invalidating more than just what the individual is saying. And that's really hard for people to overcome.
It's really hard because we are all of it. We are very much all of it. So let's take a look at... Oh,
I want to show this book.
Oh, yeah.
So part of what I was talking about, so we have this book, Molecules of Emotion, and this really goes into, she was up for a Nobel Prize. And I love this book because it really goes into the chemistry, what's going on behind the scenes when you're thinking, when you're believing, all the emotions you're experiencing. It really breaks it down into the chemistry of your system. So if you're into that sort of thing, if you're not, I get it. I happen to be one of those people who I really get into this. But it's a great book for understanding what's going on chemically throughout your system when you're experiencing those emotions and triggers and things of that nature.
It was a very interesting book.
Yeah, by Candace Pert.
It is. It was a dense read, but just because I wasn't familiar with all of the chemicals involved and everything, but she also goes through a lot of how research and studies are put together. And it was a very, very interesting book as I got into it.
Yeah.
It was very, very influential in now how I think about what's going on inside of me physiologically.
You think about it completely differently, don't you?
You really, really do.
Great.
So we just want to take a minute to wrap it up a little bit.
Okay.
So what was your main takeaway?
Oh, there were so many different things. And so one of the things I really liked that Melanie shared was just taking the pause, realigning. One of the things we use is just realigning yourself. And there are a lot of powerful questions. And so when you hit this point, when your day sucks, when everything's gone amuck,
Amuck.
Sorry. See, I'm glad you got that out of your system. That's what Melanie was, process those emotions. But it's really, how do I want to be feeling? How would I rather be feeling? How do I want to move this forward? How can I show up differently tomorrow if today is just, maybe I just shut my door because I don't want to throw up all over everybody and I just be in my heavy emotions. But, how do I want to do this differently? How do I want to move this forward? How would I rather be feeling in this moment? And what's one easy thing I can do to start feeling this way? Melanie mentioned this also as, maybe it's a walk in the park. Maybe it's, holding meridian points or whatever it is for you. But what's one easy, quick thing I can do to start feeling better? Because one thing we know about energy is once you get the momentum going and the ball rolling, momentum builds momentum. And so if I can do that one step and then the next step and then the next step, pretty soon all of a sudden I'm feeling good. And I don't care I have it. I'm wearing the stain on my shirt like a big superwoman mark. Look at my stain.
Well, and I love that because what that brings me to is one of, actually two of Thrive, a human development company's human development principles is there is magic in disruption, and then also intentional growth requires deliberate practice. So as we allow disruptions to come into our experience, it can disrupt some of those heavy negative emotions that we're feeling and move us more toward magic.
Yes.
And then as we practice that more and more, we can actually change the neural pathways, and as these new neural pathways release different chemical cocktails, we begin to experience life differently and work differently.
Yeah. And I love that you bring that up because oftentimes we talk about this and everybody's like, oh, that's a lot. Oh, that's so much. How am I going to remember all this? And it becomes fast. Once you start doing it, you, like you said, get in the practice of it,
Mm-hmm.
it's like this. Like sometimes you don't even think about it. You just go on to the next
Right.
step. How do I move forward? You're
Yep.
just moving forward and you're not thinking, how do I move forward? You're not asking yourself all of those questions to do that.
Right. And so the important question I have then for viewers is, what takes more energy? To stay in the friction of a sucky moment at work, or to take incremental steps to changing the way you experience sucky moments? So a lot of people would say, oh, probably taking the time to change how I experience sucky moments. No, actually, allowing yourself to keep feeling and being in those sucky moments drains your energy more and doesn't allow you to fill your cup, as Melanie was saying.
Right. Right. And it perpetuates more bad things happening.
Right.
And so if you can work toward getting yourself out of that state, then the possibility of better things coming into your experience gets higher.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool.
So join us next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our guest, Melanie. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, John, with Milwaukee Video. This could not happen without his brilliance and his... I can't even say enough about John. I mean, everything he does, this whole setup, the production of it, like we could not do this without him. So we thank him for that.
Yes.
And please join us next time for Brilliant Business Insights, getting you and your business where you want to go and feeling the way you want to feel.
Thank you.
Thank you.